الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين. فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم. وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين. وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم. إن هذا لهو حق اليقين. فسبح باسم ربك العظيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة. إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا. وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة. وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة. والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Dear Sheikh Usama, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining us for another one of our Friday night programs. Inshallah, to start off tonight's program, I would like to welcome our dear brother Ali Abbas for some recitation from the Holy Quran. If you could please help me welcome him with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. ثانية على حب الزهراء صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. ثالثة لتعجيل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام ميم. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم ومن الناس من يقول آمنا بالله وباليوم الآخر وما هم بمؤمنين يخادعون الله والذين آمنوا وما يخدعون إلا أنفسهم وما يشعرون في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم عذاب أليم بما كانوا يكذبون وإذا قيل لهم آمنوا كما آمن الناس قالوا أنؤمن كما آمن السفهاء ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض قالوا إنما نحن مصلحون ألا إنهم هم المفسدون ولكن لا يشعرون وإذا قيل لهم آمنوا كما آمن الناس قالوا أنؤمن كما آمن السفهاء ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا إنا معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفره إنه كان توابا صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Ahsan, Brother Ali, if we could get another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Dear Shaykh Usama, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum once again. We thank everyone for joining us in person, as also those who are joining us online. Inshallah, just a couple short announcements before we welcome our dear Shaykh. We want our Hadi families to make sure they feel safe and welcome with the children. So we just wanted to remind everybody that if our children need a little bit more room, like alhamdulillah, we have stressed the importance of giving them that freedom at that young age. So the cafeteria is open and available for parents if their children need to run around in a safe environment with their parents with them. Please feel free to go down there, and then when they're ready to come back up, we just want to make sure we respect the area with safety and just making sure that everybody benefits the most with the talk with Shaykh, inshallah. And we never want to deny our children with that freedom that they really need, inshallah. So just down the stairs, the cafeteria is available, inshallah. Our next program will be Friday evening, inshallah, on October 4th. So that's next Friday, inshallah. Please monitor our WhatsApp, social media channels for any updates or any other important information, inshallah. Inshallah, just a short reflection before we inshallah benefit from Shaykh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In these trying times, as the illegitimate terrorist state of Israel continues its massacres and commits acts of terror, we are reminded that these trials only strengthen our resilience and deepen our resistance, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant a long life to our leader, Sayyid al-Qa'id, Sayyid Hassan Nasrullah, and to all of those who stand firmly on the path of truth and justice. For far too long, they have falsely painted our leaders as villains. Yet today, the world bears witness to massacre after massacre, terror attack after terror attack, revealing who the true terrorists are. It is just not Netanyahu, but the entire Zionist project, supported and safeguarded by the caretakers like Biden, Harris, and Trump. All of them are complicit in the daily atrocities and terror being committed. We stand unwavering in our fight for justice, knowing that in the end, the truth will prevail by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are the sons and daughters of Ashura. We will never accept a life without dignity. We will never accept oppression. Hayhat minna dhilla. Hayhat minna dhilla. Hayhat minna dhilla. Inshallah, before welcoming our dear scholar Shaykh, if we could please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the protection of all the mu'mineen, our leaders, and all the shuhada that have died on the path of Islam. Without further ado, I would like to welcome our teacher, our scholar, our leader, Shaykh Usama, with 3 loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I think so. It should be okay.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I pray everybody's doing well, inshallah. Brothers and sisters, if you remember, collectively we had been reviewing Surah Taghabun. So we began just before Shahr Ramadan, and then we ended with the end of May. Today, inshallah, if Allah gives tawfiq, we're going to go back to Surah Taghabun, collectively reviewing it. Inshallah, we'll be focusing on verse number 9 today. So brothers and sisters, there's three main parts to the talk tonight. The first one is a reminder about the akhirah. The second one will be about our responsibility in current times and the struggle between truth and falsehood. And the third reminder is more good tidings for the mu'mineen, inshallah. But as always, we begin with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So brothers and sisters, we always need reasons to start again reminding ourselves of the akhirah. If we can remind ourselves of the hereafter, it has a very powerful effect on our self-building and the purification of the nafs. One might ask, how much of a reminder do we need? How desperate are we in need of reminders about the akhirah? And I will remind brothers and sisters that Allama Tabatabai, when he looked at the verses of the Quran, he found around 2,000 verses of the Quran are about the akhirah. That's almost a third of the Quran is about the akhirah. So that gives us an idea. How much do we need to be having these conversations, discussing, thinking, preparing for the hereafter? One thing we do learn in Islam is this. It is healthy to fear Yawm al-Qiyamah. It's actually healthy for us as believers to fear Yawm al-Qiyamah. Even the sinless malaika, so the angels haven't committed any sins. The angels are ma'asum. The angels, when there was mention of Yawm al-Qiyamah, they would be terrified. Once Nabi Isa simply asked Angel Jibreel, just asked him, do you know when Yawm al-Qiyamah is? And just the mention of Qiyamah was enough for the angel to start trembling. The bravest of the people in the world, like our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. They also had fear of the akhirah, fear of Yawm al-Qiyamah. So our Prophet wasn't intimidated by wars. You couldn't scare him. The idea of a battle, that wouldn't frighten him. I want to give you a story from the life of our Prophet. Amir al-Mu'mineen says this. So if you remember, the Battle of Badr was the first time we were going toe-to-toe with the mushrikeen. And we were outnumbered by the enemy, 313 versus 1,000. We weren't prepared for battle. Our guys, if you remember, these small details are sometimes beneficial. Our guys were farmers and merchants. 70 of them had swords. The most of them had wooden clubs. So it's not like we were prepared for battle. They had to march outside to stop that aggression of the Quraysh. 3 or 4 mu'mineen would be sharing one camel, just to give us an idea of what our situation was like. We had 2 horses. And then we're going to go over and fight the mushrikeen who have unlimited resources. They have body armor, they have horses, cavalry, experience. They've come out for war. And then again, if you think about what was at stake, So we're playing for all the marbles. If we had lost that battle, Allah would not be worshipped on the face forever, on the face of the earth forever. At that time, with all those stakes, Amirul Mu'mineen says, the night before the Battle of Badr, the Prophet was calmly and tranquilly praying by a tree all night. He was so peaceful and tranquil, it wasn't as if there was a war the next day. Right? But that same Prophet, when it came to Akhirah, then you see his demeanor, his facial expression, everything's changing. So it's healthy to have that fear. It's a fadila. It's a merit. We should be glad if we do have that. Now, I shared this verse of Quran with brothers and sisters last time. There was a principle that we learned. The intelligent fear the Akhirah. The intelligent fear the Akhirah. And if we will truly fear God here, we'll be safe there. I'll share the verse of the Quran with you. So Surah 80 and verse number 38 and 39, Allah says this. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. He says, Wujuhun yawma idhin musfira. There are going to be some faces on that day, the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah, that will be bright. Dhahikatun mustabshira. They'll be laughing on Yawm al-Qiyamah, rejoicing, joyous on Yawm al-Qiyamah. The condition is that we're intelligent, that we fear God here. Because unfortunately, we do see the opposite. We do see some people who literally, everything about them is giving you the feeling that they don't take the wajibat seriously. They can continue to sin, do dhulm to their families, to themselves, personal lives, and everything about them is just, no, I got this, very relaxed. One time, astaghfirullah, I was in a gathering, and I heard somebody say this with my own 2 ears. He was talking about one of the muharramat. In his mind, it was small. You know what he said? You can't do this haram, with the details, you and I so concerned about wajib and haram. He said, God isn't that petty. Allahu Akbar. That you have nerves of steel for Yawm al-Qiyamah. God protect us from ever being like that. That's not what the intelligent do. If you look at the ayat of the Quran, just about fear of Akhirah, Yawm al-Qiyamah, you know, we all handle trauma differently. We handle trauma differently. There are some times when a person can go through extreme stress or extreme fear and their hair can go gray, even if they're a young person. After the event, their hair goes gray. What does Allah say about Yawm al-Qiyamah? Verse of Quran. This is Surah 73 and verse number 17. God describing this day. He says, فَكَيْفَ تَتَّقُونَ. So how will you protect yourselves? فَكَيْفَ تَتَّقُونَ إِن كَفَرْتُمْ. If you do kufr, يَوْمَ يَجْعَلُ الْوِلْدَانَ شِيبًا. On a day that will make children's hair turn white. Yawm al-Qiyamah is very serious. And the secret is to fear Allah here. Once, Nabi Isa brought a man back to, again, the righteous fear Yawm al-Qiyamah. Nabi Isa alayhi salam, he brought the son of Nuh back to life with the permission of Allah. His name is Sam. He brought him back to life. When he brought him back to life, then he saw his hair was all white. So then he asked, he was like, were you old when you left this world? And he explained, he said, no, actually, I was young when I left this world. When you brought me back to life, I thought that was you bringing me for Yawm al-Qiyamah. I thought I'm coming back to life for Yawm al-Qiyamah. That made his hair turn white. So brothers and sisters, the righteous fear God, fear Yawm al-Qiyamah. Those who are not intelligent are those who can take it so easily. Just listen again to one of the verses about Yawm al-Qiyamah. It doesn't matter how righteous you are, how good you are, what you've done. If you listen to these verses of the Quran, just like Ahlul Bayt, listen. This one, reminded myself first. Surah 83 and verse number 6. describing Yawm al-Qiyamah again. يَوْمَ يَقُومُ النَّاسِ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. The day that people will all stand before the Lord of the worlds. So brothers and sisters, Yawm al-Qiyamah is very serious, but there are barakah to remembering the akhirah. Barakah when it comes to doing our current responsibility. Brothers and sisters, if you are people who remember akhirah much, you will have an endless ability to resist the enemy. Those who remember, I'm going to give you the words of Imam Hussein, then we'll look at some of the ayat of the Quran. Imam Hussein writes a letter from Karbala to his family. Imam Hussein. In that letter that the Imam writes, one part of it is this. He says, كَأَنَّ الدُّنْيَا لَمْ تَكُنْ. It's as if the dunya never existed. وَكَأَنَّ الْآخِرَةَ لَمْ تَزَالْ. It's as if the akhirah was always there, always present. A person who remembers akhirah much, the ability you have to resist the enemy, to take the blows and to hit back is incredible. As a believer, look at ayat of the Quran, you know it's all gonna work out in the end. If you're taking your suffering, masa'ib, they get a few in, you remember Allah in the Quran. Allah in Surah 19, and verse number 64, He says this, وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Your Lord didn't forget anything. If the believers are undergoing difficulty, if they're struggling, if they're resisting, if it's not fair, if the enemy has unlimited resources, the believer knows everything counts. And your Lord hasn't forgotten anything. From the other side, the energy that the believer has when we're fighting for God and His religion. You see, people have different reasons for fighting. Sometimes they're fighting to defend their own homelands, fighting to defend their children, different reasons. Sometimes you tap into your real resource. This one, if you look in Surah 74 and verse number 7, Allah says this, وَلِرَبِّكَ فَاصْبِرْ. For the sake of your Lord, be patient. So the ability to resist, if you're a person who remembers the akhirah, where are we all going? Why are we here? This person in the dunya cannot be defeated. And of course, in the akhirah, then there's those good tidings, but inshallah, towards the end of the speech, if I remember, and if I have time, then I'll try and remember some of those good points. Now, brothers and sisters, we're going back to our verse. So Surah Taghabun. So brothers and sisters, if you will turn to Surah number 64, Taghabun, and verse number 9. We're going to break the surah down into parts and go over each part because each word Allah has put for a reason. There are so many messages in each part of these verses. So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. We start off in this way. Allah describing Yawm al-Qiyamah. Yawma yajma'ukum liyawmil jam'. Yawm al-Qiyamah is that day where He will gather you for the day of gathering. One of the things Allah talks about regarding Yawm al-Qiyamah is that He's going to round everybody up. And He says, ذَلِكَ يَوْمُ التَّغَابُنِ. We translated taghabun as mutual defrauding. But let's just remind ourselves of the meaning, because what happens is there's a powerful tarbiyah effect of listening to these verses and these particular names that Allah has chosen for Yawm al-Qiyamah. For the mu'min, right here in the dunya. It helps with self-building. So, Yawm al-Qiyamah is the day where everybody will feel cheated. Everybody. We talked before about how both the zalimeen, those rulers, the 1%, how they will feel cheated. We also talked about how those shimmers, those khulis who carry out that devastation, how they will feel cheated for being slaves of those monsters. We talked about that. But if you remember, brothers and sisters, We also talked about, this is now for our own tarbiyah, there is a way for believers also to feel cheated. When Allah shares this information and mentions this name for Yawm al-Qiyamah, it has a very powerful effect on the tarbiyah of the believers right here. What happens is, question, when do I, as a believer, undersell? As a believer, I would only, an intelligent person, would only undersell, sell something very valuable for very cheap if I don't know how valuable it is. We believers, inshallah, we'll get to the verses that are talking about the good tidings. But just as a reminder, so we get more motivation, extra motivation. Imagine, brothers and sisters, that you were sent to a warehouse. In this warehouse, you're told before you go in the warehouse, you're given a pack back, you're told before you go in the warehouse, there are so many jewels and diamonds and valuables, right? So, as an intelligent person, as you go through the warehouse, but it's dark though. It's dark, so you can't see what you're getting, but you know that there's value, they told you. So you're trying to get valuables, you're stuffing your pockets, you're putting your pack back. After you come out of the warehouse, they turn the lights on. And then you see just what was in there. Anybody who saw, we would have done it different if we knew. If we knew what the opportunity, we would have done it differently. So Allah favored us by giving us this reminder while we can still make a difference. Yawm al-Qiyamah is the day of taghabun. The intelligent person says, while I'm still alive, let me make the most of it. Allah helping me. So, when you look at what people consider intelligent, people think those who are careful about their money, they don't just spend foolishly. They're good businessmen, right? These are smart people. Listen to how the Prophet does tarbiyah of us. Our Prophet talking to Abu Dhar. He says, Ya Abu Dhar. So he's addressing Abu Dhar. He says, Kun ala umurika ashahha minka ala dirhamik wa dinarik. Abu Dhar, be more stingy when it comes to your life, your time on this earth. Be more careful about your time on this earth than you are about your gold and silver. Of course, as the moment I'm careful about that. But the intelligent person says, look, I only have one chance to do this. I don't get 1,000 chances. I want us to just say something. I'm going to say something. I hope maybe it have effect on me. Hopefully it have an effect on you. Brothers and sisters, you and I have 50 years. I'm 51. 60 years, 70, 80 years, however long Allah grants us. And we're preparing for infinity. Right? We have 60 years, 100 years. Inshallah, we live 120 years. But we're preparing for infinity. We will be seeing the results of what we did here forever and ever and ever. A person who thinks like that, I'm preparing for it, and my time is running out. I don't have so much time. How much energy does this person have when it comes to doing good deeds, not wasting, doing wrong things? Right? Now again, as believers, it doesn't mean, as a believer, that if I had not spent the first part of my life doing the maximum, that then I should throw my hands in the air, well then it's a waste. Again, we go back to words of Ahlul Bayt, Amirul Mu'mineen now. He says, the remainder of the life of the believer is priceless. Amirul Mu'mineen says, we're still alive. The remainder of our life, let's say my life wasn't perfect up until now, I'm still alive now. Amirul Mu'mineen says, the remainder of the life of the believer is priceless. He says, why? He says, يُدْرِكُ بِهَا مَا قَدْ فَاتْ. if there was a mistake, if there was something the believer didn't do, right? He uses the remainder of his life to make up for those mistakes. وَيُحْيِي مَا مَاتْ. Maybe the believer had some good habits in the early part of his life. I wake up now, I remember I'm still alive. He brings back those good traits to life. Those good actions, he brings them back to life. So, we're looking now at our verse of the Quran, and we find, we're going to go back to our verse, we're going to find that Allah's going to give us a strategy, a formula to win. It's going to be simple, but it's timeless. What is God's strategy for the believer? How do I make the most of my time on the earth? God can say it in a few words. In 2 words, if we wanted to say, it's believe, have iman, and then act. Embrace God, embrace Islam, submit to Islam, and then after that, to act. Ayat of Quran. So, this verse, by the way, is going to contain another one of the favors of God. But let's get to that slow. So, we'll start off with God's solution. Back to the verse. It says this, وَمَنْ يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ. Whoever believes in Allah, وَيَعْمَلْ صَالِحًا. So not just belief in my mind and in my heart, and this person does good deeds. That's God's solution. This person, it says, one of the benefits, يُكَفِّرْ عَنْهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِ, that God will absolve the person of their sins and mistakes. Nobody's perfect, but one of the blessings of Iman and acting is that God will absolve the believer of their mistakes. Right? We have to do both, though. If you don't mind, I'm going to tell you a story that's not true, inshallah. We have to believe. Once, there was a little boy, and this is not true. And the little boy was afraid of the dark. He was afraid of the dark. And his mother told him he needed to go out in the dark on the back porch and get the broom for her. But he was afraid of the dark, so he said, "Mama, I don't want to go outside. I'm scared. It's dark out there." She said, "Don't worry. Jesus is there." He said, "Jesus is there?" She said, "Yeah, don't be afraid of the dark. Jesus will protect you." He said, "Are you sure she's out there?" He said, "I'm sure he's out there. He's everywhere." So the little boy thought about it for a second. Then he opened the door a little bit. He said, "Jesus, if you're out there, can you give me the broom?" So Islam requires two. Both I have to believe, but then after that I act. And faith in Islam, it's not a buffet. Iman that we're talking about, all of Islam. The believer doesn't have an opinion once God has spoken. Then after that, the believer acts. But I told you, this verse also contains another one of those many favors of Allah for the believer. Let's go back to the verse. There's a concept that Allah talks about in this verse. So he said that, وَمَنْ يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ, whoever believes in Allah, وَيَعْمَلْ صَالِحًا, and does good deeds, what will God do for this person? يُكَفِّرْ عَنْهُ سَيِّئَاتِهِ. Allah will absolve the believer, the mu'min, of their sins. You see, brothers and sisters, there's a concept that's mentioned in the Quran where Allah has many ways of absolving us of our sins, even in addition to tawbah. There are certain good things that we can do. Even if we haven't made tawbah, these can kick in. Ways, favors from Allah. So this takfir of the dhunub that Allah mentions in the Quran, He mentions multiple things that can cause Him to efface our bad deeds. For instance, raising children right. Allah talks about in the Quran, when we learn from Quran Sunnah. Being grateful for Allah's blessings. Some people, in their heart of hearts, they're very grateful. Making hijrah. These are things that Allah has mentioned in the Quran. Making tawbah. One of them, of course, is making tawbah. And there's other ones. One of them is doing good deeds. You do a good deed, one of the effects of doing good deeds, Allah, who's looking out for you, will do takfir of the dhunub. Now, there is one thing that the leader mentions over here, and that's going to lead us to our practical discussion. He says that there has to be some sort of parity, some sort of balance between the good deed and the sin. It can't be that I commit some major, terrible sin, and I do some tiny good deed, and because of that, then Allah just does that. No. The good deeds we have to do, they're important good deeds, big good deeds. And then Allah will step in. So I'll give you an example. One of the big ones that we could do now, given our current situation. We've talked before about the idea of practical wilaya, real wilaya, different from just in the mind, I love this person, right? Practically taking the stance of Imam Hussein, being in the camp of Imam Hussein. That's different from shedding tears. So, brothers and sisters, you've seen from our grand Maraja, you've seen from Ayatollah Sistani, where he talked about the situation in Lebanon, and then he told us, he said, to make every possible effort to stop this ongoing barbaric this aggression and to protect the people of Lebanon. After that, just recently, we've heard Imam Khamenei, him also address this issue and say that it is absolutely wajib for us as believers to push back against these dhalimeen. So, this is a historic opportunity. What can we do? Because on Yawm al-Qiyamah we questioned. It's the battle between haqq and batil, truth and false in our time. What are some of the things we could do that would help push back against the enemy? So I wanted just to mention of some of them, there are things that inshallah everybody can do, and then one that the leader mentioned is one that I want to do there. Why is this such a heavy action? If you remember, this is a hadith that we covered before. The hadith, so remember takfir of the dhunub, right? Doing a heavy action that Allah says, I'll overlook other actions. Hadith now. The hadith says this, وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَيَسْتَحْيِي. Allah is ashamed and yu'adhiba ummatan, to punish an ummah danat bi imamim min Allah, that believes, that follows, that obeys an imam from Allah, right? So let's say, practically speaking, on these big issues, I will stand in the camp of the Hussein of my time. Then the hadith, the remainder of the hadith says, even وَإِنْ كَانَتْ فِي أَعْمَالِهَا ظَالِمَةً مُسِيئًا. Let's say the believer had some personal problems, but on the big issues, I would stand there. That's one of the ways of getting that takfir of the dhunub. So, what are some of the things we could do that would help? Brothers and sisters, humanitarian assistance, whatever we can do, that's always important, right? Dua is always important. Protests are always important. But the leader mentioned something. The leader compared this situation that we're in right now to the imposed war. He said, if we had the one thing I'm going to mention, during the imposed war, our situation would be very different. What was the thing that they needed? He talked about the clarification jihad. That's something you and I can do to make sure that things work in our favor. I want to give you a couple of areas for us to think about over there. So there's a Quranic principle that we have. One day, inshallah, I'll mention this verse of the Quran where Allah teaches us that you and I, we never retreat from the enemy. We never back down from the enemy. We do have a concept of a tactical retreat, but that's only to punch the enemy even harder. Otherwise, Islam is always advancing. Even this opportunity that we're going to talk about is one where we're going to advance and we're going to burn them. So what are some of the areas where we could do our responsibility? One of them, brothers and sisters, is for you and I, instead of getting tired, to the masses in the world, remember, this is a media war also. You also push back and explain the realities on the ground. Who is the dhalim? Let's not think everybody thinks like us. Everybody's convinced. Everybody knows Netanyahu is a monster. One of the ways to help would be, in the clarification jihad, that we talk about the facts on the ground. Who's the dhalim? Who started this? Why did it start? Why is it impossible for the resistance to accept anything less than a victory for Hamas and that the aggression in the West Bank stop, right? We need to explain this to the world. Why is it impossible for us to accept that, right? So there's questions that the enemy is raising. Why is Iran not getting directly involved? The same enemy who before was after Hezbollah is now saying, well, where's Iran? Right? Like, all of these are areas where we're explaining the realities on the ground. What are our guys doing? What's actually happening? How are we winning? So one of the things will be the realities on the ground. Okay? The other one, right, so we explain who started, how, why, these things. The other one is the reality of this struggle. The leader said this was actually more important than the first. So the first one definitely we have to do. But more important than that, instead of us sufficing and saying that this is a struggle to protect our homeland, he said you have to go a little deeper. You can't be afraid to explain the reality of what's going on. That this is a fight for Islam versus Kufr, Iblis versus God. There are beauties that are happening right now. This is for us now, you and I, to explain to the world, instead of being shy from these things, to explain so the non-Muslims also feel, ma ra'aytu illa jamila. So for instance, those stories of those sisters who lose their eye, and then after that, you see how they and their husband are still standing strong. You've seen those pictures, people praying in the in the hospital, bandaged, right? All of these are stories, sacrifice. There are beautiful stories of Islam. What this is all about. Karbala today. Beautiful stories like this that you and I can also repeat. Sometimes not just share, but also to explain. So the other side also sees the beauty of Islam in this and the idea that we are standing up for. Another one that we have to kind of keep in mind is this. Instilling hope in people. Instilling hope. Again, you guys look at the words of the leader yourself, but you'll see this. We used to be in a much worse situation. We're a lot stronger now. We've been through much worse than this, but we're in a much stronger position right now, right? Hezbollah is going to break every bone in Israel's body, okay? But it's going to take time. This is a decolonization project. Decolonization is not quickly, overnight, right? There's a reason why they're only using their low-grade missiles right now, why they're depleting the Iron Dome, when they're going to bring the heavy stuff, right? There's a strategy for all of this. You and I, what we want to do is explain to people so they can also see why we're winning. The Israelis, if you see them butchering children and murdering kids and blowing up hospitals and chasing after ambulances, it's not because they're strong. It's because they cannot win militarily. Hezbollah has had 18 years from their last war to prepare for this. The best military minds of the Ummah have been working and waiting for this. We're not in bad shape. Yes, shock and awe, that's their modus operandi. They're going to go, right? But we're going to take them apart bit by bit, like literally. And it reminds you, some of these things we saw in the ayat of the Quran, where Pharaoh, you would think, any intelligent person, if you see that the waters have parted, that there's a mountain of water on two sides, an intelligent person wouldn't think that you would still go into that valley. But arrogance blinds. If they go into Hezbollah's territory, like literally, Hezbollah is not Hamas. They literally will be ripped. It's like more than a buzzsaw. So this war is going to take a little bit of time, but our team knows what they're doing. Ayatollah Khamenei, this is not the first time he's been in war. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may Allah protect him. In Lebanon, they've had many great ulama, but they've never had an alim and a leader like Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. So our guys are very strong. Like, the enemy has no idea how powerful we are. Of course, dua helps. We're all making those duas. But it shouldn't be the case that anybody, any of the believers, their heart should be shaking. We're in bad shape. No. This is planned and it's step by step, but it just, decolonization takes a while. So inshallah, you want to go over and you want to explain that. Now, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, remember, before I mention the next point, that we're ahead of schedule. The leader mentioned that Israel would be finished by 2040. We're way ahead of schedule. We're doing good. It just takes a while to break the system and to move that many millions of people out from the lands of the Muslims. So one story that's not true, and then our good tidings, inshallah. Once, there was a burglar who broke into a house. And he broke into the house in the dark, and he was just about to steal the stereo, and then he heard a voice. And the voice said, "Jesus is watching." So he was startled. He turned around with his flashlight, and he looked, and he saw a parrot. And he said, "Did you say that?" He said, "Yes, I did. I'm just trying to warn you." He said, "Warn me? Who are you? Warn me about what? Who are you?" He said, "My name is Moses." He laughed. He said, "What kind of people would name a parrot Moses?" He said, "The same kind of people who would name a 150-pound Rottweiler Jesus." The Israelis have no idea what they're going into. You and I, rest assured, Hezbollah has them exactly where they want them. Of course, we make our du'as and we keep moving forward. Last part, which is good tidings for us as believers. Back to our verse. Back to our verse. So Allah already told us the good tidings. We learned the benefit of the akhirah for us. In the end, where do we go? God says this. He says, وَيُدْخِلْهُ, remainder of the verse. And He will make him enter, that mu'min who does good deeds, and He will make him enter. وَيُدْخِلْهُ جَنَّاتٍ, Allah will make this believer into gardens. تَجْرِي مِن تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارِ, beneath which rivers flow. We have no idea what that's going to be. خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا, the believer will be over there in paradise forever. ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْعَظِيمُ, and that is the great success. I want to mention just one of the blessings that you'll receive when you go to paradise, inshallah. When you go to paradise, Imam Khomeini mentions this hadith. An angel will come to you and respectfully ask for permission to enter in your paradise. And the angel will read a letter for you. Right? Part of the letter is as follows. The letter the angel will read to you when you're in paradise. The letter says this: من الحي القيوم الذي لا يموت, from the living who never dies, إلى الحي القيوم الذي لا يموت, from God who lives everything, will never die, to you who now are alive and will never die. God says this: أما بعد فإني أقول لشيء, I say this about anything, kun fayakun. God, anything He wants, He says be, and it is. He says, وَقَدْ جَعَلْتُكَ, but I've made you like this. تَقُولُ لِشَيْءٍ كُن فَيَكُونَ, I have made you so that you are also now able to say to anything, be, and it is. After that, the hadith continues. It says, فَلَا يَقُولُ أَحَدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ لِشَيْءٍ. After that, there is no person amongst the inhabitants of paradise when they say to anything, kun illa wa yakun, on paradise, one of the blessings is that you'll be creators over there. Inshallah, we all go to paradise. Inshallah, we all get this letter from the angel, but we end with salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Ahsan Shaykhna, another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, we got between 10 and 15 minutes for salat. Inshallah, we'll be praying together. So if you need to do a the bathrooms are at the front. And inshallah, we'll end with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا وقع